and what better or worse time to like completely reconnoiter my art practice and make things that are terrifying to me than
when everything's terrifying.
When everything is terrifying.
Good morning, Dana. I'm really excited to be here with Dana at his show, winner of the 2021 Edge Award at the Swan Coach House. And so the title of the show, That Breeze That Just Keeps Blowing Over Me, is a wonderful grouping of paintings, or should we call them drawings, and we'll get back to that, that he's worked on for the last year in a very difficult time for all of us as we've come through, I hope, the pandemic. So my name is Myra Green, and I'm an artist here in Atlanta, and I just want to say hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks so much for chatting with me.
I love chatting with Dana. Dana's and I showed studios at Atlanta Contemporary, and I've had many studio talks over the years, so I'm really excited to see the show, because it's a big culmination of a long year.
Yeah.
Of a crazy year. A lot happened to you this year.
Yeah, a lot happened.
So let's start with the work. Do you want to talk, how would you like to introduce it?
Yeah, so it's a lot of things, and I don't really know how to classify it all the time. Okay. I kind of call them paintings. I also kind of call them audiograph drawings, and they're also kind of sculptural. They exist in a lot of things for me because I don't ever really know what I'm doing, and so I just start doing a thing, and then they turn out. And so these turned out to be paintings, and that was a weird kind of experience to kind of realize that all of a sudden I'm making paintings for the first time as an artist,
right,
doing it. And so yeah, it was a kind of wild and experimental, and this is what happened, which was fun and exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
Sounds like the year.
Yeah, sounds like the year.
So what's an audiograph drawing? I think that's a hard term.
Yeah, so I kind of made it up because
Okay.
I can, because I can. An audiograph drawing is a drawing made by a drawing machine that I built that I call the audiograph. And it's a kind of a wonderful ramshackle machine built from like old car parts and car jacks, and it all hinges around this thing called a tactile transducer that converts audio signal to vibrations.
Wait, stop there. So where did you learn about this transducer?
The transducer.
Transducer, sorry, I couldn't hear.
In my sculptural work for a long time, I've been working on activating people's bodies into space using different forms of sensation. And this transducer creates vibrations, which is a great way to activate somebody's body. So I've been using it to activate people's bodies for a long time. And so I'm familiar with this machine that takes audio signal and vibrates.
Okay.
And so I figured that'd be a good way to start this thing that I wanted to document sound. That's kind of all of it comes down to a way to document sound. And I figured that there was some way to connect a pen to it and make a mark. And then that turned into this big wild machine that's really rattly and clanky, that's got like a car jack, and it moves and it spins, all in a way, just all in like a gesture to make like a gestural mark based on sound. And so that is what the audiograph is. It's a machine that makes a gestural mark based on sound input.
So I've been lucky to see this machine, and it reminds me of old records and how I never really understand how records have sound on them. Is that a correlation, or is that?
It's kind of a correlation for sure. That's like sound takes physical shapes. And so I didn't want to reinvent everything from scratch. So it's kind of based on like a record cutting machine, but more so a seismograph machine, something that documents vibrations, which sound is, and a record cutting machine also documents vibrations.
Okay.
Instead of cutting it into a piece of vinyl, this scribes an interpretation of the waveform onto a piece of paper.
Okay. So I'm hearing vibrations.
Yeah, a lot of vibrations.
A lot of vibrations. We're sitting on a vibration.
Yeah, this bench vibrates using the transducers.
Older sculptures have invited you, the viewer, to come sit on it. Mm-hmm. And this piece sits in the center of the gallery and invites you to sit on it. And so when that happens, when the transducer is working, what's happening there?
So Well, all of these paintings are based on audio through audio conversations I had over the past year,
Okay.
mostly with people that I haven't been able to like engage with the way that I'm used to engaging with them, like mostly close friends, my mom, and then a couple complete strangers that just kind of made their way in the mix. And so all of the audiographed drawings on all these paintings are from those conversations, which were about memory. This bench plays the pieces of these recordings that are scribed onto these paintings. So you can feel physically the marks that are made onto the paintings. And that's what the bench is. And you can also hear the audio directly. So you can kind of have a better idea of what is going on in some kind of opaque work a little bit.
So that's interesting because so you're both looking at audio and then you're also feeling audio. So this is a sensorial show.
Yeah, as most of my shows are. You know, I'm really interested in how we like are aware of ourselves in a space or in a certain given context. Usually that I kind of provide the context in the space. And then activating your body, I think, is a really important way to kind of open up kind of how you're processing information and processing yourself in that context, and just being aware of yourself. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of how I use vibrations and kind of how I was thinking about making these works. So
there's this mark making, and then there's like there's 3 or 4 more layers of information on this pieces. There's this whole transfixion of color that I think as celestial. I think of it as, I'm into my tarot right now, so you can nix me on that. But things that are celestial or really soft and giving and fluctuate. Can you just talk about how you then apply color or think about color?
Yeah, so kind of the process of like constructing these images, these paintings or whatever, I'm still like uncertain. I still feel guilty calling myself a painter because I don't think I am. I made these things. And so the process of these was I would get a hold of a friend. It's like, hey, I want to talk about memory. So all of these are based on memories. And we would have a conversation where I would ask them a series of questions, but then that would usually prompt a conversation because we hadn't talked in months. And so the questions were, tell me about your earliest memory of feeling happiness. And then the next one was, tell me about an early memory of you feeling sadness. And then the last one was, tell me about a sense memory you have where when you feel that sensation now, it just takes you back into that sense memory. And so all of these paintings are kind of based on those memories of the people I was talking to. So I would interview them, and they would end up being these long conversations, and I would usually in the conversation I would go, oh, that is a beautiful memory, that is a beautiful image, that is it means something to them clearly, and it felt something to me, and I would just start to think about oh, how can I do this? And then in the studio, sometimes I would listen to them again, and sometimes I would just base it on my memory of the conversation. So kind of layers of remembering memories. And then I would just start to free associate. The shapes, some of them are quite literal. This painting right here, the memory was about fabric in motion. And so I just started dropping fabric on paper and tracing the outline until I found a compelling shape that I liked. Others of them were much more just free association, mark making, which is a thing that I'm just kind of trying to get more comfortable with, the marks that I make, because it's not, I don't really make marks in a lot of my work historically. So it was just kind of working through it and kind of yeah, this feels like the memory I'm thinking about right now. And then as I was working with color, I used spray paint, partly because I'm comfortable with it and I wanted to make things use things I was comfortable with, but also you can get soft, undefined, nebulous color fields. And I feel like when we're remembering things, it's never crystal clear, especially as we're remembering things start to coalesce from the ether. So the way that I thought about the color was kind of thinking about all the pieces and parts of a memory just before they coalesce as they're coming together. And so that's kind of how I was thinking about the basic construction for the first layer of these kind of compositions.
Like, talk about these insane frames. Is that I feel like that's the sculpture moment. Like, I will
totally.
woodwork until these things are perfect.
Frames took me way less time than the
Exactly.
thing.
That's what I remember.
Well, and so I wanted to so when you frame a thing, it becomes a legit thing, right? And I was thinking about how to take these pieces of paper and make them feel like they're as important as the audio and the stories that are they represent, right? And so giving them the frame was important. And long ago when I decided that they weren't going to be square, I was like, well, let's make some wild frames. But it was also the carrot at the end of the stick, making the drawings or paintings or whatever, the two-dimensional pieces on paper, was wild and hard and experimental and exciting. But making the frames, I can just turn my brain off and do that. That is just
that makes me so mad.
Let me loose in the wood shop and I'll do it. And so, but these things can't operate without them.
No.
They are part of the work.
Yes.
They're not holding the work. They are inextricable from each other.
Yeah, it's more than a container.
Oh yeah.
They all sort of deal with this concept of nostalgia, and I'm interested in how you have created this narrative with friends or people you cherish. But then I also think about you, what is your nostalgia? And I'll just say all the questions at once. When do you vibrate? What is that sensorial memory for you? But I didn't know there was all these things, and I'm I know what they are, and I'm I don't know what they are. Because I feel that the way you're talking about memory is something that is very distant, opposed to just even our last conversation, which was, a week ago.
Yeah.
So how do you think about that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
So kind of go through them. So I, being in this year, in this really, weird and sad and isolating year, I didn't really want to think about it now, right? I was thinking about it constantly, all the time, in a bad way. And I kind of wanted to think about way back. Way back. And it seemed like a safer place in the beginning, and then as I worked through, oh, it's not safer at all. It's just older, right? And what that gives is a little bit more perspective, and also it's part of the foundation for how we're reacting to things now, how we dealt with joy and trauma and sensation younger has informed how we exist now and how we operate and how we work. And so to answer the question about when I vibrate, I feel I feel the most things all the time, but it's all the small things. It's remembering humming into a vacuum cleaner and making the tones slightly vibrate.
Okay, that's totally you. That's all vibration.
I mean, yes, it is. Period. Full stop. But kind of the things I remember the most and think about the most are the sensorial memories, the things that made my body feel a thing, and sometimes it's I'm a Cancer, I'm a very emotional dude, and so sometimes the sensations are the overwhelming emotions of a sensation, and those are the ones that scare me the most and I don't think about as much. But the ones I think about way more are the little things, right? So I don't know, maybe this was an easier way to deal with the way back memories when they're somebody else's. I don't know.
There's a whole self-portrait series in here, just to,
oh yeah, I know.
just so you know.
And a couple of them already exist.
Oh, well, I would love to see those because I think they would be interesting. I think that's an interesting. I have a very different relationship to memory, and I literally have told people don't worry, I will not remember high school, and I really don't. I just remember a point of being oh, I have control and agency over memory, right? Like I somewhere in my brain, because memories are, again, what you just, as you described them, and I completely agree, this amalgamation, and it's this force that you apply to them that makes them what they are. And so therefore you can make them as pliable or as real or as fake as you want them to be, or truthful or not. Having memories that my mother tells me her memories, I'm like, that's not really what happened. And she's like, well, how do you know what happened? I was like, well, I was
But does
there.
it matter? And that's the thing.
It's a perspective, right?
That's the thing I think about a lot. Like, how many of my memories actually happened?
Yeah.
The way that I remember them, and it's like none of them, right?
Right.
Because it's my response to those memories. So one of the reasons I wanted to go way back was so I did this project at the Temporary Art Center last year, where I invited people. I built the audiograph machine for this, and I invited people to share memories that they don't often remember. And like in theory, like sciencey term insert here is like every time we remember a memory, we're then remembering the remembering of the memory. We're replacing that with the most recent iteration. So trying to get one that you don't speak a lot, trying to get one that is less disrupted by the process of remembering was kind of the goal with that piece. And a little bit of the goal with this one. I didn't want them to be something from last week where you're like, I remember every beat of that conversation. I wanted the impression of that, and then also how it made you feel then, but then in the describing of it, how it makes you feel now. So a bunch of these, there's like the memory, and then there's people reacting to have just saying the memory and just remembering the memory.
Right.
And so at the end of all of them, there's kind of this little like loop back to like, oh yeah, I was over the moon. Like it's always a commentary, which you never think about in the moment. That's all retrospective.
Right.
And so that these are less portraits about a memory, but more like a portrait of remembering that memory. It's a document of the remembering.
So I know that you've done a lot of installations in town, but this feels a little bit different.
Yeah.
And supported, funded.
Yeah, that was amazing.
So tell me about the last year and the experience preparing for this show and this experience.
Well, it's been great to kind of have the support of the Edge Award and the Ford Arts Foundation to like just know that I have a year to do a thing. And then there was a residency at Hambridge as part of it. So that gave me time to think about a thing. And that's where I really kind of like pulled apart the ideas I had going into it and kind of just goofed around. And through the goofing, like I started making things like this. And so like having that time at Hambridge and then the support to just not feel the pressure to make the same thing for the next show that I've had was awesome. And knowing that I could come in this space and like have like a solo show was exciting. And it was like motivating to like, let's do it. Let's go all in and completely make something new and terrifying and exciting.
I'm gonna take the time and say thank you, Dana, for a beautiful show, a beautiful entree into the art world. I try to go see art once a week, and it was exciting to come see a friend and see that he's succeeding and making beautiful work. Congratulations on the award, on the Edge Award.
Awesome. Well,
yeah, whatever.
Well, thanks so much for coming and this conversation and all the other ones we've had and for coming and taking a look at it.
I think we will have a few more. My stools came. You're coming back to my garage. It's like happy sitting time in my garage.
Awesome, perfect. We're leaving that in. Thanks, Myra.